everyone, and welcome to our webinar on how to build a culture that excites your employees. I'm Caris Lambert, the Digital Content Manager here at Moorepay. And in this HR Essentials webinar, we'll be sharing how you can create an employee culture that actually excites and motivates your staff. So the topics we're covering today are what motivates your employees according to them and according to employers with data from our own survey, building upward mobility into your business, how to engage with DE&I initiatives, payroll processes and the importance of consistency when it comes to employee experience, and a Q&A where your questions are answered on everything about this topic by Michelle. Just some housekeeping. If you do have a question as we go through the webinar, we'd recommend you to pop it in the question panel that you can see there, and we'll get as many as we can answered at the end of the session. If you're facing any technical issues, you can pop it in the question panel too, and if there's an influx, I'll keep an eye on it and I'll know that there's some kind of technical issue that we can quickly fix. But otherwise, please don't worry if you have to bob out halfway through or you don't want to take notes, because we are recording this webinar and we'll send it to you all once the webinar's finished. So just enjoy. And a tiny bit about us before we start. Moorepay have been around since 1966 and we make payroll and HR easy. Our platform is built on super secure Microsoft Azure technology, and our services are backed by dozens of qualified payroll and HR subject matter experts like our Michelle with us today. And the proof is in the pudding with our industry recognised accreditations at the bottom there and our excellent Trustpilot rating too. And how do we make payroll and HR easy? Through intuitive, simple software and quality services, which means that your business hopefully can save a lot of administration time, keeping on top of those processes, but also stay compliant with the current legislation too. If you'd like to learn anything more about us, just let us know in the chat and one of our advisors can follow up with you. So joining us today is Michelle Hobson, our HR Services Director. Michelle joined Moorepay in 2017 and she runs all of our HR and employment law services, including our consultancy service. She has over 15 years experience in the operational and strategic side of HR, and she's CIPD qualified, of course. So you're in absolutely excellent hands in this webinar. And now I'll pass over to Michelle.
Thank you, Caris, and thank you everyone for joining today. So to start on this topic then around motivation of employees, this is a huge topic, something that we are getting asked about a lot at the moment. Businesses are coming to us to ask about proactive approaches to motivating employees, and this is where we decided that it was a great topic to talk about on this webinar. Why it's becoming such a big and prevalent topic, I think, is a mixture of things. I think on the back of COVID, there's been a bit of a shift in expectations of what employees need and want within the working environment. I think that's a big thing. We've talked previously in webinars, and it's another hot topic in the media, is the Great Resignation. Employees are seen to have more choice now about where they work, when they go, where they join, and that is causing a lot of issues for employers. And obviously motivation, employee experience, employee engagement all ties back to how do you minimise the impact of the Great Resignation. And the other thing really, I think, is if, you know, just now at the moment, we are all facing a cost of living crisis. And this is making people in their lives and in their jobs assess things, assess their choices, assess the roles that they're taking on, assess who they're working for, and looking at what positive changes that they can make to impact their lives. And I think all of this leads back to employees generally asking the question, how do we motivate employees? How do we retain them? And how do we get the best out of them when we've got them here? And I think that's the topic that we're looking to delve into today. So to start this off then, if we go into the next slide to talk about our recent survey findings, I think this is a great place for us to start. So there was 2 questions that we asked, and the first one was around asking employers, have you noticed a change in how motivated your employees have been in the last year? And then there was also a question to employees, which I'll come into a sec. But starting with what we asked employers, how motivated have your employees been in the last year? You can see the outcome of this on the slide. In the middle, not much change. That is the by far where the land lies. At the other end, people saying from an employee and an employer point of view, being a lot more motivated is lesser, and there is a higher shift towards they're feeling a little less motivated. So I think the key findings you'll see that we've pulled out from here is that both employers and employees agree that for the majority of employees, motivation are relatively stable. Employers, though, are over predicting a drop in motivation, and 17% of employees are feeling that there's a boost in motivation. Maybe that hasn't been picked up. I think it's quite an interesting place to start this. I think there's quite a lot that we can take from this, and this has led on to the things that we're going to talk about shortly. If you go on to the next slide, this is around both employees and employers. What would increase motivation? So the previous slide has shown us that there isn't much change for sort of almost the majority, about 50% split, but there are swings and puts and takes either side of that. So focusing on or taking from that what we think we need to make employees more motivated, you'll see here what employees and employers think. So that there seems to be quite a common denominator here, that both sides of the coin are agreeing that increased salary is a really important technique to prove motivation. So 45% of employees and just over 45% of employers, and that still remains quite a high motivator. I think employers are using a range of techniques to improve staff motivation, and that shows there. All of which, though, are reportedly less important for the majority of employees. So everything that you see along there around flexible working, employee engagement surveys, benefits, relationships, they're all deemed to be more important to employers than they are to employees. And I think that's an important point to take away whilst we're talking about the rest of this topic. There needs to be a real connect between what employers think and what they do and what employees want. And that's something that you as businesses really need to bear in mind, that you are focused on what employees want and not just what you see as the important things. So to take that a little bit further, then the next slide talks about what employees want. I think there is an important thing to call out here before I talk about this, which I'd like to sort of mention around employee engagement surveys. So just bear that thought in mind. But going back to the survey findings that we did, what you will see on here is the 3 main things that employees have said they wanted, no surprise compared to the last one, was an increase in salary, and specifically an increase in salary outside of their review. So most companies have an annual review process where employees know that at some point of the year the salary will be reviewed, but it seems that employees are looking for more than that. So 45% of the respondents want the ability to get a pay rise for great performance without having to wait for that annual pay review. And I think that's a question we need to start asking ourselves as organisations. Is the annual pay review the right way to go with things? Somebody may have to wait a year to be recognised for the performance that they've achieved. Is that going to motivate them? Is there a more agile way of doing this? And these are the questions we need to start asking ourselves. I think another important thing to remember is, do your employees know what they need to achieve a pay rise? Is it clear to them what is how your pay reviews are worked out and what they can do to influence that? Obviously, there's going to be budget constraints, etc., and a process to follow. But are they really clear on what they can do to be part of that pay review and get the most out of it? Have you got structured role progression, etc.? But I do think we need to be thinking, is there a more agile way of doing this? Employees are also asking about better benefits and discounts, and I think this is particularly important as we are facing the cost of living crisis. 21% of respondents here wanted better benefits. There isn't a one-size-fits-all. What appeals to one person in your organisation may not appeal to another. I don't know off the top of my head, thinking about something like childcare vouchers, it's a great one to have for those of us who have families, but that won't motivate someone who maybe doesn't have children either at the moment or not at all. What is it that they want? So having that wide, diverse spread of benefits, they've got to appeal across your workforce. And that's where you can look at having flexible benefits packages where employees can pick and choose what they want and need. And that will change over time, allowing them that responsibility. I think the discounts piece is also a really important part. Increasing people's salaries is certainly one way to not only reward them, retain them, but actually face into the cost of living crisis at the moment. But a lot of organisations are doing that in conjunction with looking at benefits and discounts. So you've got one element that you've got your pay, and how can we help you get the most pay that you are eligible to, progress, get an annual pay increase, whatever that is. But then once an employee has got that take-home pay, how do you help them make that go further? So whether that's a discounts portal that allows them access to discounts for their weekly shop, or if they want to buy a big purchase, does your company offer technology vouchers that will allow them to make a technological purchase, whether that's a computer or it's an Apple Watch, but pay for that as salary sacrifice? There's lots of inventive ways that you can think now about how you can help their employees' actual pay go further for them. And then the other main thing that employees have said they wanted to see was better relationships. 16% said they wanted to see improvements to their team relationships, and I think this just shows how important things are around it. Obviously, there's tangible things that we've talked about around pay, benefits, making money go further, but this is a bit more of the softer side and the things that aren't as tangible but are really important. So thinking about training on tolerance and the value of different talents, personalities and values may help you achieve this. Look at how teams work together, how they share when they work best, encourage lots of different ways of working, of how they can build themselves together to create these good, strong working relationships that people really benefit. And also then look at how you step in to solve any tricky relationships that may be there, because they can really manifest themselves in quite problematic employee relation situations. And sometimes, you know, you could have a relationship issue in a team that escalates so much if it's not dealt with in the right way, either proactively or once it's happened reactively. And the true fact could be that you could throw money at an employee to stay, you could give them a great range of benefits, but if some of these parts aren't working around relationships, then they're not going to be motivated, engaged, and may not want to stay in that organisation. I think just the bit I talked about at the beginning, just to finish on that part, if we just flip back to the previous slide, Caris, around what employees want, thank you. I just wanted to call out really the importance of employee engagement surveys. Now, whilst it did come out on one of the survey finding that that's not necessarily what they want to see, I think it's really important for us as businesses to understand that we need a clear understanding and idea of how your employees are feeling and what is important to them. So whatever you're doing in terms of employee engagement, experience and initiatives that you're putting in place, that you understand what is important to your employees and that you can build on that. There are so many options of how you can do these employee surveys, and there's lots of businesses out there that can support you with this. And we, as an HR services team, have supported some of our customers with employee engagement surveys. There's annual surveys, 6 monthly surveys, there's what you call pulse surveys, which are a bit more regular, short, snappy, and a bit of a pulse check, temperature check. But it's all about gathering this information, analysing it, and then playing it back to the employees. One thing that I've kind of learned in my career in operational HR is that these surveys are brilliant, but the key to it is what you do with it afterwards and how you integrate them into your plans going forward. And then even beyond that, I always think there's a kind of a great saying of "you said, we did." I've sat many years ago in various organisations where we've taken the survey, we've listened to the employees' feedback, we've put in a load of initiatives over the course of the next year, And then when the survey's gone out again, it hasn't quite played back in how we'd have expected. And one of the key things that we had missed out is the looping back round to the employees of saying, okay, we listened to you, and this is actually what we did. So you said and we did, and playing that back to them and ensuring that we're really open and honest about what we've done on the back of it. So just really to make sure that when you're thinking about what employees want, take into account some of the survey findings that we've got, look back at these graphs in more detail once you get the slides, but then really think about how you can personalise that to your organisation and find out what your employees want. So on to the main topics then. I think when we were looking at how to do this webinar, employee experience, what motivates or engages employees, is such a huge topic. You can already see just from those first 3 slides that there are lots of things to delve into. Obviously, this is a relatively short webinar and we're not going to have time to go through everything. So what we've done is narrow this down to look at a couple of key areas. We've also kind of looked back at previous webinars that we've done on similar topics, and we've tried to pick out potentially topics we might not have talked about before, areas that you might not have thought of, encompassing the whole topic, but trying to sort of pull out some ideas for you. And the first one that we want to talk to you about is building upward mobility in your business. I think this is particularly important when we've talked about the Great Resignation. And simply, upward mobility is about the rate which your employee advances into a new role or opportunity with better compensation. And this is particularly relevant when you're talking about the current cost of living crisis and everything that has happened on the back of COVID in terms of the way things are changing. So to talk a little bit more about this, reasons why it's important and reasons why you as a business should prioritise and think about this. And the 4 key areas that we've got are around retention, engaged workforce, easy onboarding, and reducing hiring costs. So starting with retention, one of the main reasons an employee leaves their job is because of a lack of career development. Obviously, there may be a monetary element to that, but in terms of feeling that they can develop their career, and often, you know, these kind of people who are moving on are the ones who are motivated, the ones who've got high potential, and it's looking at how you can harness and retain that talent within your organisation. Employees will in general stay longer, even if they know that there's opportunity to progress in the company. There may not be an opportunity right now, but they can see other opportunities coming up that people are filling. They can see that that's generally part of the culture. So look at how you kind of widely communicate those opportunities. And even if there isn't something right now, if it's visible in the organisation that this is something that's done, you're much more likely to retain those key people with the high potential. In general, it just is around a more engaged workforce. If they can see how their achievements are going to impact their career development and help them in the future, then they're naturally going to be more motivated to reach their goals, engage in the work they do, create positive stakeholder engagements around the organisation. And, you know, the absolute sort of grassroots result for a business is that more engaged employees will perform better for the organisation. If you are promoting internally, obviously there is a fact that the employees who will be in new roles, but they'll be fully trained in what your business does and your company procedures. They'll have a new role or new tasks to learn, but the basis of that will be there. So it's a much swifter and easier onboarding process. They will probably already know the people they need to engage with. They'll know how things work, and it's a lot swifter and smoother. So you're saving time on that onboarding, and also a bit of a safe in the knowledge that they already know the organisation and they're motivated to be there. And then the last one is around reducing hiring costs, recruitment at the moment, and I speak from experience. I'm sure most of you will be nodding out there. Recruitment is really difficult at the moment. There's a real vie for talent and that top talent. If you have got a pool of engaged, motivated, high potential talent in your organisation, the bottom line is it's going to reduce your recruitment costs. And that isn't just around the physical costs, it's also around the time that it takes. We're tending to find of our own experience, we're getting so far in a process with a candidate and they'll either pull out because they've had an offer elsewhere or their current employer is trying to keep them. It's quite volatile at the moment, and anything that you can do to help your business with those hiring issues whether that's cost, time or money, alongside engaging your current employees is a real win-win situation. And as it says there, it's helping you use that money, time and energy into thinking about other things of the business, of how you can improve things. So a little bit more on then how you can build upward mobility, and there's just some really kind of key points on here, and we've tried to lay them out in easy to remember and kind of quick things to think about. Building up mobility comes from various angles, but you need to look at clear role development, look at the roles that you've got in the organisation and think, how do you have a roadmap for progression and for compensation, but beyond that role? So if someone starts us off as a customer service executive, off the top of my head, what are the next roles? There might be a customer service team leader, and then a customer service manager. Is it a vertical route, or are there sideways moves that they can make? Are you in a situation where you're promoting people to build up a wide range of skills so that they can become a real rounded person? But what are those role developments? Have those conversations with your employees. Also make your managers accountable for it. This isn't something that should just sit with the higher level leadership team. It should be something that your managers are taking responsibility for as part of their performance review process, development conversations. But what have you got in place to support that? It's always useful to prioritise internal recruitment, advertising jobs internally before you recruit externally. You may want to do this in parallel, but try and think about how you can promote and prioritise that internal recruitment. As I said before, even if an opportunity isn't given to an internal person, just the fact that the employees can see that out there are opportunities that are coming up, they can see other people being either promoted or moved into other roles, that is all going to be really beneficial to you. Think about the training that you allow your employees to take to upskill and prepare themselves for their next position. Not just training that they need in their current role. How can you help them? Do you have the option to put something in like a future leaders program where you can select people to go on this and really build up the skills they'll need to move? Have you got the right salaries in place? And how, quite a contentious subject, but how do your employees know that they're being fairly compensated for what they do? It's a question you should be asking yourselves. Do you have a structured grading system? Is it a bit more behind closed doors? But what can you do to help employees think that they are being paid a fair salary for what they do now and for what they could potentially do in the future? I've talked a little bit about future manager programs, but I've been part of future manager programs. I've helped run future manager programs, and I think they're a great way to take that high potential and to harness the talent that they've got. And then the last thing is looking at mentorship opportunities. I think sometimes it's easy to forget things that can happen quite naturally, really harnessing and getting the most out of this. So how can you encourage junior and senior colleagues to learn from each other? There may be sort of a mentor training program that you can put together to make sure that you've got people in the organisation who are ready to mentor, but then how do you promote that internally and give more junior staff the opportunities to know that they are being supported? And I think just one additional point to make on this is, how do you celebrate success and showcase those employees who've progressed through the business? You know, success stories are always great, and hearing from the people who've been part of that, it's always great to verbalise and communicate to the rest of the organisation. So on to the next part then, a bit of a shift in topics, but another really interesting hot topic that we hear a lot of in the HR services team within Moorepay is around diversity, equality and inclusion initiatives. And it's really important for businesses to ensure that they have the right type of culture with regards to DE&I, but also that they get the benefits that come from having a wide-reaching, diverse pool of candidates to select from, but then also having a wide-reaching and diverse workforce working for them. And I think we know that this is important to employees. It was talked about a little bit in the survey, and I think we are hearing a lot more. There are instances where people are being interviewed and the questions that they are asking of the organisations they're working for is, what are your DE&I initiatives? How will I be sure that I'm part of a diverse and inclusive organisation, and what kind of things that you've got in place? So again, we thought this was a really interesting and important topic to pull out. So on the next slide then, we've just got some facts around why it's important in a bit more detail. I've kind of mentioned here that employees want it, but 74% of UK employees find it important to work in an organisation that values diversity, equity and inclusion. And it's really important for us as organisations to recognise the impact that this has, especially when you think about how things have changed over the generations, and these things have become much more relevant, much more prevalent. It's important that we stay ahead of this for both our employees' benefit, but also for the business's benefit. It can also be important because it can help the business make better decisions and as fast. So, you know, inclusive teams, that the stat on here is that inclusive teams can make better business decisions up to 80% of the time. And in some instances, making those decisions twice as fast with half as many meetings, which is a really interesting statistic. And there's a lots more research that you can do on this. It was just kind of pulling out that quite interesting fact. There is evidence that diverse workforce has a direct link to profitability, and customers in the top quartile for executive gender diversity were 25% more likely to generate greater profits. And companies with ethnically diverse boards are 43% more likely. And this is where you really start to get some really interesting facts around the benefits of having that wide, diverse workforce with lots of different ideas and the direct link that has to the business success. It's also said that inclusivity breeds innovation. So companies that were ranked as more inclusive are 1.7 times more likely to be innovative leaders, and 1.8 times more likely to be change ready. Again, some really interesting things to think about. It can help you beat the competition in competitive marketplaces. Diverse companies are 70% more likely to report that they captured a new market, and plus companies with 30% plus women executives are actually deemed more likely to outperform in their marketplaces. And it attracts talent. It kind of goes back to what I said at the beginning. We're looking at about 3 in 4 job seekers at the moment are looking at diversity when deciding whether or not to accept a job offer. It is becoming more and more important to employees. And going back to the recruitment difficulties I talked about before, this is all about putting you in a positive place to attract the best talent that you possibly can. So the practicalities of a DE&I initiative then, and talking about how you initiate a strategy. There are a number of larger organisations that you've probably seen in the media, on LinkedIn, I'd say probably over the last 5, 6, 7 years, who are actually going one step further and creating DE&I roles to focus specifically on this topic in their organisation. And this is absolutely amazing. It just shows that we are really starting to think differently and really making steps to think in a different way. But, you know, you don't have to be a large multi-million or even multi-billion organisation with the budget for a DE&I director to make an impact. There are lots of things you can do at grass level. And I think, as with a lot of HR related topics and a lot of the topics we talk about here on the webinars, starting with a strategy and laying out your intentions is a great jumping off point. So on here, there's just a bit about how to initiate one of these strategies. It is all about overcoming prejudice, conscious and unconscious bias, and changing some really entrenched negative attitudes within an organisation. And it's not easy, you know, especially if you're an organisation with a long history, with long-serving employees, with a particular way that you've done things. It can be quite a daunting task, but this is a really good place to start. So to start and progress with this, organisations should work on developing a more inclusive culture which embraces differences, allows people to challenge in a safe environment and not sort of jump to, well, that's not how we do things here. You know, even just simple things of opening up those conversations and allowing people to question why is a great way to start with an inclusive culture. Work on developing inclusive approaches to all your employment law policies and practice. Managing personal behaviours within an organisation, particularly in the leadership team. This is where it starts, but looking at the behaviour across your business and where you see behaviour that maybe isn't conducive to inclusivity, sort of thinking about how you will deal with that and how you will can make small changes and dealing with any issues then they arise. But it is best practice to write down what your approach to all this is and start with a strategy. We have helped a number of organisations who've come to us around looking at policies and strategies around diversity and inclusion, and it is just a great way to start by getting things down on paper and demonstrating the very first part, which is your commitment to being a diverse employer. One thing that's really important, as it says on here though, is to know that you've got buy-in. It's important really to develop your strategy in collaboration with staff. This isn't something that you should do as a paper-based exercise in an office with your heads down, not looking at the outside teams that are there. They're really important to helping you create this, and they're much more likely to embrace and take forward your strategy if they've had a helping hand in delivering it. So then the next piece on diversity management is based on CIPD's report, Diversity Management That Works, an evidence-based review. And there are 6 things on here which are sort of top recommendations for diversity management. The first one around think global, act global. If you are a more global organisation, make sure that your strategy accounts for those local contexts, because there will be local legislations, differences and norms. Evaluate the data at each local or national level to make sure that you've got a clear idea and that you're covering all bases. Get the manager buy-in, use your business, use the managers that you've got in there, get the managers on board, treating them as key agents in fostering diversity and inclusion, and helping them with training, with ensuring that they're the ones who are leading this, looking at topics, difficult topics like unconscious bias. Don't be afraid of really kind of facing these head on, and your management team will be key to making this work. Number 3, data. It is really important that you have good quality data on diversity, equity and inclusion, on the makeup of your organisation, of what's important to your employees, data on the recruitment that you're doing. Just there isn't such thing as too much data, but ensure it's reliable, representative, but do remember that it needs to be protected. A bit more on training, and this can be training across the whole organisation, holistic training that includes everyone, not just managers. This can really help change attitudes and foster a diverse and inclusive workplace. Ensure though that the training's ongoing. It's not something that you can just train at the beginning and think, well, I can tick that box. This is something that should be ongoing and agile. Rethink your recruitment policies, look at the way your processes are, making sure that you're trying to remove as much biased hiring and promotion, and avoids that kind of cultural fit traps. Think about how bringing in people with a different perspective really could benefit your organisation. And then the last one in here is about be ambitious. Ambitious action has been proven to be very effective, and positive action programmes can really help you as part of this strategy. And there's a lot of evidence of the effectiveness of positive action practices and strategies, and it will really help you going forward. And I guess the last point to note on diversity is just really to bring home the point around utilising your workforce. So on the next slide, sorry, the slides are just a little bit behind. There we go, perfect. Is around utilising your workforce. They are just as keen to improve your business as you are. Encourage colleague-led networks. Is there a working group that you can form where you can listen to people's experience, ideas, and help them become ambassadors? It's something that should be led from the top, but it's something that you should really ensure that everyone is involved in. And just generally, colleague networks can help facilitate and it become a bit more natural for two-way communication in your business. Give different groups access to a safe space to raise concerns and ideas. and it provides a structure where you can get the most important feedback, and most importantly, you can gain insights that are only available to the people who have lived the experience of the issues that you're trying to tackle. It is really important that you kind of use that. We sometimes do this in our own organisation when we're looking at webinars and the topics that we want to talk about. There's a really interesting webinar topic that's going to come up next month, which you'll find out about shortly. And we are actually talking to our own employees about their experience that they've had both here and in other organisations. And we find that's a great way to get teams on board. So the last bit that I just wanted to touch on before we go to any questions, because I imagine there'll be a few questions on this, is just looking at pulling it back towards some of the more basic foundations that organisations need to support an employee experience. We've talked about some of the bigger ticket stuff, some of the stuff that requires a lot more thought. But the thing that we'd like to pull out here is actually the importance of payroll and process. And the impact that some of these basic fundamental needs, the impact that a negative experience can have. So the stats on here that will kind of leave you with the impact of a poor payroll experience. 60% of UK employees surveyed admit that they found pay mistakes on their pay slip. 39% of UK employees say they've been paid late, and we will all know as our own individuals, not even necessarily as managers, what an impact that can have on things that are due to come out of your bank. 39% is a really high amount. And 20% of Brits have actually quit their job because of issues to do with payroll. It is such a fundamental basic right, and it's really important. So just on the next slide, it's just pulling out that we really believe consistency is the key. So across all HR processes, it's really important to create a stable and calm working environment, and consistency can help with being very brutal about it, legal action, because it will ensure that your managers are treating employees fairly across different teams. It helps with discrimination, and just generally it can make employees feel happier because it's something that they shouldn't have to worry about. They feel valued and confident knowing that the proper processes are in place. And consistent HR experience should always include clear processes, enforcement of the rules and policies, easy to navigate tools, and training for your line managers. And the last point on this is really around the employee experience. More and more employees are looking to have the data and the control in their hands. So if you think of yourself as a consumer and the apps we use on a daily basis, we pretty much have our life in our hands in that mobile smartphone that we all have these days, everything from banking to be able to order something from Amazon at 3 AM. And what we are seeing now is there's no different with how employees want to take control of the things that they're responsible for at work. So letting employees take control of their payroll experience saves time and gives an overall better experience, which is a lot more of a positive thing for your view. And obviously this ties in with what we do here at Moorepay with payroll and the Moorepay mobile app, which has been launched over recent months, and we're seeing an increase in uptake on it, and it's allowing employees and managers to quickly access data, approve, submit, and you'll see there some really positive feedback from one of our customers. And I just think in everything that we're talking about with this topic, it's important not to forget some of the basics. Some of the big ticket items can think, right, that's going to make a real difference, but don't take your eye off the ball. Of the basic things that employees expect, I guess, would be my parting comment. So lots of information there. I'm conscious that I've talked for quite a while and thrown a lot at you, but I just hope it starts to give you things to think about. But I will hand over now to Caris to see what questions we've had come in.
Thank you so much, Michelle. That was really good. I hope everyone listening found it just as useful and interesting as I did. So we'll just have a little Q&A now and cover some questions that were left for us. We got a couple of questions about the survey, so I just wanted to clear that up. So the population size of the survey was about 500 or so employees and 500 employers as well. and it was taken on a survey from our website traffic. So these employers and employees came from a range of industries, and I hope that clears up for you. Also, yes, we'll share a copy of the slide deck in an email to you after the webinar, as well as a link to the recording, so don't worry about that. And as for some questions for Michelle, the first one is, do you think working relationships have been affected by hybrid working, the pandemic, and everything that's happened in the last few years?
Yeah, I think sort of my personal opinion would be it could not have affected things. So if you wind back, it's strange to say that, you know, it's almost 3 years since the start of the pandemic and home working. If we take it back to there, the effect of everything that happened during COVID is bound to have had an impact. You know, all very quickly, a lot of businesses just almost just had to down tools from an office sense and quickly set up at home, and that had obvious impacts on relationships. Just think about in those 2 years, how many new starters organisations had who started without having met anybody in person in the organisation, and everything was done over Zoom calls. I think as we've moved towards hybrid working, there are probably positives and negatives, and you can dive into it. You'll be able to come up with a list of pros and cons for hybrid working. It is about finding what works for your organisation, and if you are doing hybrid working, look at the impact it's having. If you think it's having a negative impact on relationships because people aren't in the office full time, look at what's causing that and what you can do to change that. It doesn't necessarily mean that you just have to divert back to 5 days a week in the office and, you know, everything's going to be perfect. Just really look at it from your personal point of view, your organisation's point of view, and see what options there are to improve this. But this is the question, you know, if an organisation wanted to come to us with this, we could delve into a bit more advice around the opportunities to look into it.
That's a really good answer. Thank you very much, Michelle. We've got a few more coming in. So this one's on diversity. When we don't have great diversity in our company, what could we do better? For example, the language on job adverts.
Yeah, I think if you're feeling that you don't have a very diverse workforce when you look across it, it really is going back to what recruitment tools and techniques you are using. It's making sure that when you are recruiting, you are attracting as diverse a pool of candidates as possible. Look at the language you're using, look at where you're advertising. Sometimes it's even useful if you are recruiting in an office just to look at the makeup of the population in the area around. Does your office environment reflect that makeup of the population? And if not, why are you not attracting them? It is going back and looking at it from a recruitment strategy point of view. Again, there are loads of different things that you could look at, too many to talk about on this question, but that's the place you start, is with your recruitment strategy. How are you recruiting? Where are you recruiting? And the biggest thing that will help you with that is recruitment data. So when you're getting the pool of candidates, try and see what diversity information you've got at recruitment stage, and then look at selection stage. What diversity information do you have at that, and kind of look through the whole process. And then once you've got all that data, you can go back to the beginning and decide what it is you need to change.
Thank you for that. Yeah, that's a very comprehensive answer. Thank you. Another question that's come in, with a focus on keeping costs fairly low, do you know what others are doing to give employees a voice? I suppose this might be in regards to colleague networks.
Yeah, I mean, giving employees a voice doesn't necessarily come with a cost. This is something that you can set up and listen. I'm guessing that question means, though, because I've not really got enough information, but so forgive me if I've got this wrong, but giving employees a voice doesn't really cost anything. You can set up working groups, you can set up ways to get feedback sessions, however that is that you get that. One thing that I know that businesses sometimes worry about is if they set up these working groups or ask for this feedback, that they may be raising expectations of employees that they can't meet. So if the resounding feedback is we want to be paid more and the business is like, do you know what, we need to pay more for whatever reason that is, that can sometimes be a nervousness that once you start on this path that you may end up disappointing your employees. I think if you are setting up allowing employees to have a voice, just being very realistic with them about setting it up and about the feedback. And it isn't an initial, well, computer says no, you're not going to be able to get a pay rise. Feedback to them the situation, be as open and honest as you can be, but then look at other things that you could put in place that maybe doesn't quite give them what you want, but proves that you are listening and adapting. I hope that answers the question, but to whoever asked it, if you do want to email in a more detailed question, then obviously we could look at that, because it's just a bit hard to tell with the information.
Yeah, that's great, thank you. Yeah, the person who asked said that's answered it perfectly, thank you.
Wonderful, brilliant.
So I'll do a final question because I'm conscious of the time, but this is a very good one. So what's the best way of presenting engagement survey results back to the employees, in your opinion, Michelle?
Yeah, there are lots of different ways to do it. I mean, you can give high-level results in wider business comms. So if you have regular business updates, give the top-level overview. My biggest advice, though, it would be good to talk about it in different ways. So if you're talking about it at a high level for the overall organisation, then work with your managers and think about how you are going to take that forward with individual teams. Because even in an organisation of 50 or 100 people, there's going to be peaks and troughs and different teams and the way people are feeling. You'll never get one consistent approach. Even within teams, you'll have opposites of people who are very engaged and people who don't. So I'd look at a variety of ways to feedback the findings of the results at a high level, and then do a bit more of a deep dive through your own managers to their teams. And then the biggest thing is, okay, this is what we're hearing from it. And then getting the employees involved in action planning, whether it's a small group that are involved in the action planning, what is it that we can do, or what the ideas that they can take forward. Also allowing your teams to have some accountability and responsibility for making them happen. I always think the most successful kind of employee engagement initiatives are the ones where it's a real collaborative approach. It isn't employees thinking, well, I've told you what's wrong, you better go fix it, and I'll sit here and wait for you to fix it. Sometimes there are things that need fixing at the employee level. It's a real mix. So have the high level, the more detailed ones, and then involve them in the action planning and really try and focus on the outcome of those action plans. The first part is understanding what the key to making a difference going forward would be. Going back to also what I said earlier, you know, what is actually happening on the back of it, and then going back and re-emphasising and reinforcing that you said, we did. I think that's always a really simple and effective technique.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that, Michelle. So that will wrap up the Q&A time. If you are looking for any more information and advice from our experts, then feel free to check out our Knowledge Centre on our website. We've got all sorts on there. We've got all of our past webinars, HR and payroll, our demos. We've got guides, white papers, everything. So feel free to take a look if you want anything more. Also, if you did want any help and support with your HR or payroll processes, including advice or HR and payroll software, then our team of experts are on hand to help. And as you can see, they're very highly commended. So just let us know in the comments if you'd like to learn anything more about our services and solutions, and one of us will be in touch. So I'll send over this webinar recording by tomorrow morning, so please keep an eye on your emails for that, and that will have the slides in it too. Otherwise, thank you so much for coming. Thanks very much to Michelle, and we'll see you at the next one.